There was a time when Thanksgiving looked very different from the feast we know today. Before green bean casserole and canned cranberry sauce became icons of the holiday, American families gathered around tables filled with dishes that spoke of thrift, tradition, and the changing tides of history. Some of these foods came from the earliest colonial kitchens, passed down through generations. Others were products of the Great Depression or the rationing of World War II. Many were simply trends, dishes that once felt modern or luxurious, only to vanish from our holiday tables as tastes evolved. These forgotten foods tell us more than just what people ate. They tell the story of resilience, of immigrants bringing their own flavors to the American table, and of the ways industries like canning and gelatin companies shaped our traditions. Some of these dishes may seem strange to us now: savory gelatin molds, boiled turkey, even cow tongue. But to families a century ago, they were cherished staples. Tonight, we're taking a trip back in time, revisiting 15 old Thanksgiving dishes Americans stopped making. Each one is a window into the past, a reminder that our holiday meals have always been about more than just food. They've been about memory, identity, and survival. So, as we move from the colonial hearths of the 1600s to the retro kitchens of the 1950s, let's rediscover the foods that once defined Thanksgiving and ask ourselves why they disappeared. Number 1. Oyster stuffing. It might surprise you, but for much of the 19th and early 20th century, Thanksgiving stuffing often came with a briny twist. Oyster stuffing was considered a delicacy, especially in coastal New England, where fresh oysters were cheap and abundant. Housewives mixed bread cubes, butter, herbs, and chopped oysters to create a rich, savory dish that felt luxurious yet familiar. For many immigrant families, oysters symbolized prosperity, making them a natural fit for holiday celebrations. But as oyster beds declined and tastes shifted, the dish slowly disappeared. Today, the idea of seafood and stuffing might sound unusual, but for generations, it was a highlight of the Thanksgiving table. Next, we'll look at another forgotten way of serving turkey, one that feels almost unrecognizable today. Number 2. Boiled turkey with oyster sauce. Before roasting became the gold standard, many families actually boiled their turkeys. The bird was simmered until tender, then served with a rich oyster sauce poured over the top. It might sound bland to us now, but in the 18th and 19th centuries, boiling was a reliable way to ensure the meat stayed moist, especially before ovens were common in every home. This dish represented abundance, pairing the holiday bird with oysters, which were considered both affordable and festive. Over time, as roasting pans and modern stoves became widespread, boiled turkey fell out of fashion. Yet for early Americans, it was the centerpiece of countless feasts. Coming up, we'll explore a side dish that once defined Thanksgiving with its earthy, comforting flavors. Number 3. Chestnut dressing. Long before packaged stuffing mixes lined grocery store shelves, chestnut dressing was a beloved staple. Families roasted chestnuts over open flames, peeled them, and folded the nutty, buttery pieces into bread or cornbread dressings. Chestnuts were plentiful in America until a blight wiped out most of the native trees in the early 20th century. Their disappearance from the landscape meant their disappearance from holiday meals, too. Today, the flavor of chestnut dressing is almost forgotten, but for those who tasted it, it was pure autumn comfort, warm, hearty, and deeply tied to the land itself. From hearty nuts, we now turn to a dish that wasn't rich or filling, but decorative, a reminder that Thanksgiving once included much simpler fare. Number 4. Celery and olives platter. Believe it or not, one of the most common Thanksgiving starters in the early 1900s was a simple platter of celery stalks and green olives. Celery was once considered a luxury item, grown in greenhouses and displayed proudly at holiday feasts. Families would set out a glass dish of crisp celery alongside olives, sometimes stuffed with pimentos. It might sound plain today, but it carried real cultural weight back then. a signal of refinement and hospitality. As celery became cheap and everyday, the tradition faded, leaving behind only a faint memory of when celery was the star of the holiday table. Next, we'll look at a dish born from thrift, one that turned scraps into something surprisingly memorable. Number 5. Pickled watermelon rind. During the lean years of the Great Depression, families wasted nothing. Even the rinds of watermelons, usually discarded, were sliced, brined, and spiced into a tangy, crunchy pickle. On Thanksgiving, these pickles offered a sharp contrast to the heavy meats and starches. The dish carried a sense of resourcefulness, a reminder of how families stretched every ingredient to feed their loved ones. While watermelon rind pickles may seem odd today, for many Depression-era households, they were a cherished part of the holiday table. From humble pickles, our next dish brings us back to sweetness, one that became iconic, then slowly faded away. Number 6. Candied sweet potatoes with marshmallows. At first glance, this dish seems timeless, but in truth, it was a marketing invention. In 1917, the Angelus Marshmallow Company published a recipe booklet suggesting marshmallows as a topping for candied sweet potatoes. The combination caught on quickly, and by the 1950s, it was a Thanksgiving staple. Families loved the balance of caramelized sweetness and fluffy, brown marshmallows. For kids, it was the best part of the meal. But over time, palates shifted toward less sugary sides, and roasted or mashed sweet potatoes began replacing the candy-coated version. Today, it's often remembered more as a curiosity than a true favorite. Next, we'll turn to another dish of the mid-century table, one that was as decorative as it was edible. Number 7. Cranberry molded salad. In the gelatin-loving 1950s, cranberry sauce didn't just sit in a bowl, it was transformed into elaborate molded salads. Housewives mixed canned cranberries with gelatin, oranges, or even mayonnaise, then set them in decorative molds. It was less about flavor and more about presentation. A shimmering, ruby-red cranberry ring brought modern sophistication to the Thanksgiving table. But as the obsession with gelatin waned in the 1970s, so too did cranberry molds. Today, most people settle for canned or homemade cranberry sauce, while the once glamorous molded salad fades into memory. And speaking of forgotten sides, our next dish goes back much further, rooted in Native American tradition. Number 8. Hominy casserole. Hominy, corn kernels treated with lye, was a staple food for Native Americans long before Europeans arrived. In early America, it was often baked into hearty casseroles with butter, milk, and sometimes cheese. For many families, hominy casserole was a nod to the very origins of Thanksgiving itself. But as industrial foods took over, hominy dishes disappeared from mainstream kitchens. Today, outside of the South and Southwest, few Americans even know what hominy is. Yet for centuries, it was a symbol of survival and cultural blending on the Thanksgiving table. Next, we'll turn to one of the strangest dishes once served at holiday feasts, a meat few would dare put on their table today. Number 9. Cold tongue. Yes, you heard that right. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, slices of cow tongue were considered a refined delicacy. Often served cold with mustard or horseradish sauce, it appeared at many Thanksgiving spreads. It was practical, too. Tongue was inexpensive, nutritious, and could be prepared ahead of time. But as refrigeration improved and tastes modernized, organ meats fell out of favor. Today, the thought of tongue on a holiday platter might spark more shock than appetite. After that shock, our next dish feels more familiar, though once upon a time, it was the star pie of Thanksgiving. Number 10. Mince pie. Before pumpkin pie reigned supreme, mince pie was the crown jewel of Thanksgiving desserts. Made from dried fruits, spices, and often beef suet or meat, it carried the rich, complex flavors of Old England. Early Americans considered it essential to holiday feasting. Its decline came as pumpkin pie, easier and cheaper to make, took center stage. Today, mince pie lingers mostly as a Christmas dessert for some, but it once defined the holiday season in America. Next, we'll see that even the main bird itself wasn't always guaranteed at Thanksgiving dinner. Number 11. Goose or duck instead of turkey. It may surprise us today, but for many American families in the 18th and 19th centuries, turkey wasn't the centerpiece bird. Goose and duck were just as common, sometimes more so. They were smaller, fattier, and easier for families to raise. In immigrant households, goose was often the bird of choice, carrying old-world traditions to the new. Over time, though, turkey became the symbol of abundance, big enough to feed a crowd, and celebrated by writers like Sarah Josepha Hale, who helped popularize the holiday. Goose and duck slowly faded to the sidelines. Today, they're seen as specialty meats, while turkey reigns as the official bird of Thanksgiving. Next, let's look at a dish from the mid-century that once sat on nearly every holiday table. Number 12. Green bean casserole, Campbell style. Few dishes represent 1950s Thanksgiving like the green bean casserole. Invented by Campbell's Soup in 1955, it combined canned green beans, cream of mushroom soup, and crispy fried onions. It was quick, inexpensive, and carried the stamp of mid-century convenience cooking. For decades, it was a staple. But as fresh vegetables and scratch-made recipes regained popularity, many families quietly left it behind. Today, it's remembered with both fondness and skepticism, a symbol of a time when canned foods defined American cooking. From creamy casseroles, we now turn to a sweet dish that came straight from the South and once defined holiday hospitality. Number 13. Ambrosia salad. Ambrosia salad was more than food, it was nostalgia in a bowl. A mix of oranges, pineapples, coconut, and later marshmallows or whipped cream, it was a staple of Southern tables in the early to mid-20th century. At Thanksgiving, it brought color, sweetness, and a touch of tropical flair to the meal. But changing tastes and the rise of more sophisticated desserts pushed ambrosia aside. To younger generations, it feels more like a curiosity than a tradition. Yet for those who grew up with it, one spoonful brings back memories of family gatherings and church potlucks. Now, let's go back even further to one of the very first dishes ever served at Thanksgiving feasts. Number 14. Succotash. This humble mix of corn and lima beans was a direct gift from Native American cooking. Colonists embraced it as a nourishing, simple dish, and it carried through centuries of holiday meals. In some regions, succotash was so common that it was considered essential to Thanksgiving. Over time, though, its simplicity worked against it. As more elaborate sides filled the table, succotash was left behind. Today, it lingers mostly as a regional dish, but it once symbolized the earliest blending of native and colonial traditions. From humble beans and corn, our journey takes us to a dish that once brought a touch of elegance to the Thanksgiving breadbasket. Number 15. Parker House rolls. Soft, buttery, and slightly sweet, Parker House rolls were invented at Boston's Parker House Hotel in the 1870s. By the early 20th century, they had become a Thanksgiving tradition across the country. Families prized their pillowy texture and golden tops, perfect for soaking up gravy. But with the rise of store-bought dinner rolls and frozen breads, the tradition of baking Parker House rolls faded. Today, they're rarely homemade, though the recipe still exists. They remain a reminder of when bread itself was a centerpiece of holiday pride. Next, we'll dive into some truly unusual creations from the mid-century kitchen, dishes that may shock modern taste buds. Number 16. Tomato aspic. Imagine a Thanksgiving dish that looks like Jell-O, but tastes like spiced tomato juice. That was tomato aspic, a mid-20th century favorite. Housewives would pour seasoned tomato juice into a gelatin mold, sometimes adding celery or olives, and serve it as a cold salad. It was considered chic, even sophisticated, at a time when gelatin was seen as modern and stylish. But to modern palates, Tomato jello is more shocking than appetizing. As the craze for molded salads faded, so too did tomato aspic. Today, it's a symbol of a very different idea of elegance. Next, we'll step even further back in time to what Americans ate before pumpkin pie became the star. Number 17. Pumpkin pudding. Before pumpkin pie took over Thanksgiving, families often served pumpkin pudding. This custard-like dessert was made by baking spiced pumpkin puree with milk, eggs, and molasses. The result was rich, smooth, and comforting, served either in bowls or in crustless dishes. Pumpkin pudding was easier to make than pie, requiring no pastry. It was common in colonial times, when resources were limited. As flour and pie crusts became more accessible, pumpkin pie replaced pudding on most tables. Still, for early Americans, this humble dish was the taste of the holiday. From soft puddings, we moved to something heartier, another centerpiece meat that once rivaled turkey for attention. Number 18. Cider glazed ham. While turkey was often the main course, many families also served ham, especially in regions where pork was plentiful. One popular preparation was cider glazed ham, roasted with apple cider, cloves, and brown sugar. The sweet and savory flavor made it a beloved holiday dish, especially in the 19th century. But as turkey became the undisputed king of Thanksgiving, ham gradually moved to Christmas. Today, it's rare to see ham on a Thanksgiving table, though for many families, it was once as traditional as the bird itself. From hearty meats, let's turn to a dish that might surprise you, a soup made from what was once considered a luxury vegetable. Number 19. Celery soup. In the late 1800s, celery was a status symbol. Grown in special greenhouses and sold at high prices, it was considered refined and elegant. Wealthy families often began their Thanksgiving meal with a creamy celery soup, showcasing both their taste and their prosperity. As celery became inexpensive and ordinary, the soup lost its special status. Today, it's rarely made at home, but it remains a fascinating reminder of how food once carried deep social meaning. Now, prepare for a dish that truly shocks modern sensibilities, one made from parts of the animal few of us ever eat today. Number 20. Sweetbreads. Once considered a delicacy, sweetbreads, the thymus or pancreas of young animals, were served at many lavish holiday meals. Baked, fried, or worked into savory pies, they were prized for their tender texture and subtle flavor. For earlier generations, no part of the animal went to waste. Serving sweetbreads was a sign of resourcefulness and refinement. But as American tastes grew more selective, organ meats fell out of fashion. Today, sweetbreads are almost unheard of at Thanksgiving, though they once graced the tables of the wealthy and the working class alike. Next, we'll turn to desserts again, this time, simple sweets that once brought comfort to Depression-era families. Number 21. Prune whip. During the 1920s and 30s, when desserts had to be simple and economical, prune whip was a common sight on Thanksgiving tables. Made by whipping stewed prunes with egg whites and sugar, it created a light, airy dessert that felt special without requiring expensive ingredients. To families struggling through the Depression, prune whip was both thrifty and elegant. But as times improved and more luxurious desserts returned to the table, prune whip quietly disappeared. Today, it's remembered mostly by name, a symbol of a generation that made do with what they had. Now let's step back even further to a dish tied to the earliest Southern traditions. Number 22. Corn pone. Corn pone was a no-frills cornbread, cornmeal mixed with water and salt, then baked or fried into sturdy cakes. For early settlers and enslaved families, it was sustenance, not luxury. On Thanksgiving tables, especially in the South, it stood as a humble but vital side dish. As baking powder and flour became more accessible, lighter cornbreads replaced corn pone. But for centuries, this dish carried deep meaning, reminding Americans of survival and simplicity. Today, it's rare to see corn pone at a holiday feast, though it once fed generations. From humble bread, we now move to a dish that once masqueraded as something far more exotic. Number 23. Mock turtle soup. In the 19th century, turtle soup was considered a delicacy. But when real turtles became scarce, Americans turned to a substitute, mock turtle soup. Made with calf's head or organ meats, it mimicked the texture and flavor of turtle meat. On some Thanksgiving tables, mock turtle soup was served as a prestigious first course. But as tastes modernized and organ meats fell out of favor, the dish all but vanished. Today, it stands as a reminder of a time when creativity and thrift ruled the kitchen. Next, let's look at a colonial dessert that has almost disappeared, yet once defined the very essence of American holidays. Number 24. Indian pudding. Perhaps no dish is more closely tied to early New England than Indian pudding. Made from cornmeal, molasses, milk, and spices, it was a slow-baked, custard-like dessert that filled kitchens with warmth. Colonists adopted it from native food traditions, and it became a Thanksgiving classic in the Northeast for centuries. But its long cooking time and humble appearance made it less appealing in modern times. Pumpkin pie eventually overshadowed it, but Indian pudding remains one of the oldest truly American holiday desserts, now nearly forgotten. And finally, let's close with a dessert that once shared the spotlight with pumpkin pie, filling homes with a scent of spice. Number 25. Gingerbread cake. In the 19th century, gingerbread cake was as much a part of Thanksgiving as turkey. Rich with molasses, cinnamon, and cloves, it brought warmth to cold November nights. Families treasured its hearty texture, and it was often served alongside fruit preserves or whipped cream. But as pies became the dominant Thanksgiving dessert, gingerbread faded into the background. Today, it survives mostly as a Christmas treat, though it once held a proud place on the holiday table. Thanksgiving has always been about more than food. It's been about family, memory, and tradition. As we've seen tonight, the dishes that once graced our tables tell stories of resilience, creativity, and changing times. From the thrifty resourcefulness of prune whip to the elegance of celery soup, from the comfort of chestnut dressing to the extravagance of mock turtle soup, each dish reflects not just what Americans ate, but how they lived. Some of these foods may strike us as strange today. Tomato aspic, boiled turkey, or sweetbreads might not tempt modern appetites. Yet for the families who served them, they carried love, pride, and a sense of belonging. And isn't that what Thanksgiving is all about? As we gather around our own tables this year, with pumpkin pie, turkey, and cranberry sauce, it's worth remembering the foods that came before, dishes that connected generations and defined an era. This has been the World Tapestry. If you enjoyed this journey into our forgotten Thanksgiving past, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your own family's lost recipes, and join us next time as we uncover more stories from the kitchens and tables of America's history. Because the meals may fade, but the memories remain.